Okay, so hi, Dr. Rockne. Again, thank you for agreeing to have this interview with me. I was wondering, I have the list of questions, so how would you explain mathematical oncology to students who are just discovering it?
Yeah, so mathematical oncology is kind of what it sounds like in that it's using mathematics to study cancer. And there's a lot of different ways we can use mathematics to study cancer, but the way that I do is building mathematical models and mathematical models to predict how cancer is going to grow or respond to therapy. And the way you can think about a mathematical model, the most kind of relatable mathematical model you can think of is gravity. So if you throw the football, it's football season now. If you throw the football, you can predict where it's going to go based on its initial position and velocity because we understand projectile motion, we understand gravity. The representation of gravity mathematically is a mathematical model, and it's sufficiently precise that we can not only predict where the football is going to go, but we can send satellites into space, and we can blow up asteroids a million miles away. We can land, rovers on Mars. So mathematical oncology is about writing the equations and mathematical models for how cancer is growing and responding to therapy so that we can help patients have better responses to their treatment.
Okay, so what led you to pursue a career in mathematical oncology?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story that I'll make short for the purposes of this interview. But the short thing I'll want to start with is that I would never have predicted when I was your age or in high school or even at the beginning of college that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I got into mathematical oncology because when I went to graduate school to do my PhD in applied mathematics at the University of Washington in Seattle, I found out that you got your tuition paid if you did research. So I looked around for research labs that were hiring, and Kristen Swanson, who was my PhD advisor and is considered one of the leaders and founders of the field of mathematical oncology, along with several others, but she's definitely one of them, was hiring at that time. So I did my PhD research with her, developing mathematical models for brain tumor response to radiation therapy. And the rest really is history because I really enjoyed it. I found a lot of satisfaction in it. It's a very impactful contribution to society. I felt like I was using my math talents for good, so to speak, right? So, I mean, I was using math in a way that could help other people. And after I finished my PhD, I went on to continue to do research and went to Northwestern University in Chicago as a postdoc. And then I came to City of Hope as a faculty, and I've been doing mathematical oncology research at City of Hope since 2015.
Could you speak a little bit about how math is important to cancer research, such as the brain tumor models, and one example of how it could be applied?
Yeah. So math is becoming more and more and more important in every aspect of science, but particularly cancer research right now. And that's for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because of the data. The data that we're collecting is so complicated and is in such high quantities. We can collect so much of it that really without math, you can't understand the data. And a perfect example of this is how we think about DNA mutations or anything to do with DNA sequencing or gene expression kind of data, genomics data, I'll say in general. It's impossible to understand it in its absolute sense. And the thing you can use to kind of relate to that is that, if you think about a Rubik's Cube, what makes a Rubik's Cube hard for most people? I think you play around with it, you're good at it. But what makes a Rubik's Cube hard? It's 3 dimensions, it's a cube, but each face has a color. So it's really kind of like 4 dimensions, three, X, Y, Z, and then a color. It's a very difficult puzzle because you have to move things around in X, Y, and Z, but you also have to keep track of the color. That's just 4 dimensions. Your genome is like 8 billion dimensions. If you think about base pairs of being a dimension, And then if you even say, well, it's not even that complicated, it's just about, genes that produce proteins and how cell functions. Okay, fine. Then it's like 20,000 dimensions. So trying to solve a 20,000 dimensional Rubik's Cube is kind of how you can think about how your cells and DNA evolve over time. So it's extremely complicated. And so that's why you need math really to help understand it. But like I was saying before about using mathematical models to predict cancer progression response to therapy, you don't have to go through and track every single gene and every single protein in the cell. In fact, I would argue that it's not even really possible to do that. But the prediction of how a patient's going to respond or not is all comes down to math. So whether it's a model for the cancer growth or whether it's a machine learning kind of approach to take all the data and try to figure out who's going to be a responder or not, or what you might think of as artificial intelligence, these all these approaches to deal with the data, make predictions, understand how the patient's doing, all revolve around math. So the math plays a really, really important part in all of science right now, but particularly cancer research.
Could you speak a bit about some of the bigger challenges in creating mathematical models, such as how you go from all the variables in the cell to like the most important ones?
Yeah, so this is a really, really fascinating and fun and challenging part of what I do and in cancer research and in science just in general right now. So the way that mathematical modeling effectively works is you take some observations and you try to encapsulate the observations in equations. And to make a slight variation on my previous example, if you think about the way we shifted from an Earth, a sun, an Earth-centric view of the solar system to a sun-centric view of the solar system, it all revolved around observations of planetary motion, right? We understood that there were things like orbits that we saw the moon, we see the moon in certain phases and in certain places in the sky. Different planets in the solar system, we observe them at different places in the sky at different times. And so what you can do is you can write down equations that represent that process. And then you compare the equations with the data. Because if you have a model, it has to agree with the data, assuming your data is right. Okay, so this is a big assumption. But assuming you have good data, if you have a model, it has to explain the data or has to be consistent with the data. So that's the first step is the first two steps, making an observation, writing down some equations, and then comparing those equations to the data. If you're at that point now where you say, I've got some equations and I compare them with the data, then the next thing you do is say, okay, well, does it make a meaningful prediction? Can my equations explain something that I didn't already observe? Or if I take some of the observations out, could it explain something that had been taken out? And that's part of the model validation process. So building the model, validating the model, and then using the model to predict something are all fundamental steps of how you do mathematical modeling. A very, very interesting recent advance in this field is now using machine learning to effectively use the data to discover the equations. And this turns that whole process I just described, which is how all of science was done effectively for all of human existence. And now kind of turns it around and says, if I have enough data, can I use the data to actually recover what the equations must be? And this field is known as model discovery. And there's a number of different approaches to do model discovery, but it's becoming more and more clear that this is something we can do. So if you take all the planetary trajectories of the planets over time, you can use these model discovery approaches to now figure out what the equation of gravity is. Because before you had to be someone like Einstein, like Newton, like Galileo to write down these equations. And if you do that, if you understand what you're observing, if you understand the math well enough, you write down the right equations, you've made an enormous contribution to science. all the most famous scientists you can probably reasonably imagine off the top of your head, like Newton and Einstein and Dirac and others. They're famous or well known for their science for lots of reasons, but principally because they figured out the right equation for the right problem. We're getting to a point now in machine learning and artificial intelligence and science where if we have the right data and we have enough of it, we can start to figure out what the equations are in a backwards way. Um, and that is profoundly amazing and is something that allows us, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years to start to uncover what the equations of life are, what are the equations of biology, what are the equations of cancer, rather than having to guess. Because what we've had to do, all of, like I said, all of human existence until recently is guess. And that's what makes Einstein Einstein. Not only did he know a lot of physics and know a lot of math, but he figured out through very sophisticated guessing what those equations must be or should likely be. And it turns out he was right. And over 100 years, he's been continually proven to be right. So he had an extremely good yes, and that's what makes him Einstein. But if we can get now to the point where where you can remove that element of guessing, that element of having to kind of figure it out yourself, we can get to a really advanced point in science where we can assign equations, we can assign mathematical models to just about any process that we can characterize through data really well. And that is an amazing thing. That is a truly amazing thing.
So how do you,
So let me just summarize your question of what are the pieces, what are the steps involved in doing the model, building the model, validating the model with data, and then using the model to predict and going back and through that loop is always the fundamental heart of scientific discovery. And that's how that process works. The new wrinkle in that process is removing that step of writing down the model, of figuring it out by someone who's just extremely lucky or extremely smart, and starting to accelerate that part of model building through model discovery from the data. But it's still that process of making an observation, writing down a model, mathematical representation of that, comparing with the data, going through and validating that, and doing that process over and over again, which is the core to what we do in science.
how do you think that this new method of model building will affect the ability to develop cancer treatments in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think it will revolutionize it. It will revolutionize it like machine learning and artificial intelligence has revolutionized, Chat GPT, search, all these things. Now, it has a lot of flaws, right? We know that AI can hallucinate. We know that AI can tell you things that are just plain wrong. We know that AI has a very difficult time reasoning through very kind of basic reasoning problems. But it's also true that AI and large language models and other kinds of highly complex learning models can tell us something, and we can learn from them at I think, arguably faster rate than we could learn before. And so the model discovery advance helps us do what we do and always have done in cancer research, I think, just much faster. So I think we'll identify better drugs, we'll identify more effective drugs, we'll identify patients that are responding to treatment sooner, we'll be able to tailor treatments to the individual patient more efficiently and more precisely. And ultimately, it will allow us to detect, diagnose, and treat cancers with more precision and more efficiency.
Thank you so much for your time today. One last question. What advice would you have for high schoolers who are interested in mathematical oncology?
Yeah, do what you've done, and that is reach out to people that are in this field. We're a very collaborative, very engaging community, I'll say, of mathematical biologists, mathematical oncologists. So don't be afraid to reach out. There's actually a pretty strong presence of mathematical oncologists online, whether that's on LinkedIn or X, Twitter, or other places. There's a newsletter, mathematical-oncology.org has a newsletter. You can sign up for the email newsletter and find out all recent research, labs that are taking interns and students. You can ask ChatGPT what mathematical oncology is. You can go to the web page, the Wikipedia page that you are going to write and develop along with other people in the community to learn more about it. But first and foremost, reach out to scientists and investigators that are in this field and ask, if you can learn, participate, do things like that. If you're really interested in the technical details, you take as many math and physics and biology classes as you possibly can. So you do those things, but not just those things. An important piece of this research is about um, all branches of science. So chemistry, ecology, evolution. Um, I think there's a lot of value in liberal arts as well in terms of thinking about problems from different perspectives. But for the field in general, yeah, obviously you want to have a lot of math, as much math, interest, and experience as you can, but reach out to labs and see what you can do to learn.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome, Isaac.